I believe that a business owner and their team should not have a company that runs them. I believe you all have the gift of having companies that you run, that give you joy, that give you success, and that give you meaning.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I'm so excited. We have a special guest today. His name is Herb Cogliano, and he leads his own advisory practice that leverages the Scaling Up performance platform that is described in Verne Harnish's award-winning book, Mastering the Rockefeller's Habits-Scaling Up. And Herb is a business coach. He's an experienced CEO Scaling Up Practitioner. He's a professor of the Scaling Up Master's Business Course. And he has learned firsthand what it takes to overcome many business challenges. Herb is pursuing his passion of working with leaders of growth companies to achieve more freedom by helping them create industry-leading strategies, a culture of accountability, flawless execution, along with healthy cash flow within their organization. So please join me in welcoming Herb to our platform. Hey, Herb, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Happy New Year to you and to all your many listeners. And I look forward to a great talk and just so excited. Profit First, I was telling Suzanne, had such a great impact on me and my particular company. And I look forward to helping all of you by sharing some lessons that have helped make our company successful as well.
I love it. Well, we have an audience of scaling entrepreneurs, they're 7 all the way through 9-figure companies. And this is a hot topic for many of them, right? And, I think a lot of us have read the book Scaling Up, and we've really enjoyed it. And we're excited to have you on our podcast today to talk about really how we could implement that and what are some key things that we need to be looking out for as scaling entrepreneurs. So first of all, let's talk about your journey.
Sure.
Obviously scaling up changed your life for the better, but tell us about your own personal journey with this.
Yeah, you know what? I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, grew up in a family business, mother, father, 2 brothers, sister. Always loved what we could do about entrepreneurial freedom. We were in the employment business, so getting people jobs was something that was very purpose filled for me and my family. But there were challenges. We navigated over 13 different recessions throughout our 54-year history, and that can be tough. And if you think about the experiences over those decades from startup to scale up to turnaround to franchise to acquisition, there were many chapters in our growth journey, and each one of them came with a different type of complexity. And you know the old saying, it's not what you know that hurts you, it's what you don't know. And those different chapters of complexity are a whole bunch of unknown for business owners and leaders. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from our journey is that scaling your company is really about the owner's ability to scale their people and their leadership team. It can get lonely at the top. You're making all the decisions. You're taking all the risk. You're sometimes overworked and underpaid. And our ability to help you scale your people so you can work more on the company versus be stuck in it is an important part of navigating that next stage of growth. So looking forward to sharing some more of those stories as we talk, Suzanne, about my 35 years learning a lot of wonderful things.
Now, one of the things that I find interesting is that, Herb, you feel that there are really 3 primary barriers to scaling up.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised it's just 3. But maybe you could talk us through a little bit. What are these 3 barriers and how do we overcome those?
Yeah, the first one is leadership succession. You become the bottleneck. You're used to making all the decisions. You go from 1, 3, 5, 12 employees, which you can handle very well, but now you have 25 to 50, and you can't make all the decisions, and you have to trust, you have to empower, and you have to be willing to let go. And they're going to make mistakes, and you have to be willing to allow that. So allowing that development phase and going from making the decisions for coaching up others to make the decision, not every owner knows how to handle that well. So that's a big barrier for people, knowing how to let go, delegate, and coach up. The second barrier is scalable infrastructure. What do I mean by that? Number one, it's organizational infrastructure, the org chart, communicating, decision-making, command and control. And you become a bottleneck to that org chart growing because these people don't know how to communicate, command and control, and decide, and you get stuck. And the second part of that is more employees, more customer types, more product types, more locations make scaling your infrastructure more complex and therefore more bottlenecks. The third part is market dynamics. You don't change as the market changes around you. So imagine having a great last year or two. Sales are wonderful, profits and margins are high, but then competitive products come out. More competition moves into your backyard. You're being commoditized and your margins are dropping, but you don't see it, nor do you do anything about it. And then a year later, your business has shrunk or plateaued and is not growing. So those three things are major barriers for an entrepreneur in their leadership to get to the next level.
I love that. So let's talk about the first one. And that's the one that you mentioned regarding not building the leadership team, right? There's so many people like in that first initial phase, you're able to manage everybody, right? That first 5, maybe 12 if you're mighty. But as you grow and compound, right, you've got managers and there's sometimes turnover of managers. So when you're looking at bringing in that leadership, right, first of all, where do you start with bringing in the right leader that, because you can bring in the wrong leader and it can change, especially when you're that small, right, the entire culture of your company. So let's talk about what goes into bringing in leaders.
Yeah. Historically, what happens, Suzanne, is they bring in leaders that complement their weakness. So if I'm good at sales and operations, but I'm not good at finance, I'm going to lean towards bringing in my first controller or CFO because I'm not comfortable with it. The business requires more experience and sophistication in that function, and I know I'm not the guy. So we typically lean towards the weakness first, but the hard part is as you grow to the next level and you have to replace yourself in areas of strength, that's where people get stuck. If you're the head salesperson in your company and you are the brand, it's hard to feel like anybody would ever sell or represent your company better than you. And so you can feel like they don't measure up to your standard. You may micromanage that more because you think you know it so well. And therein lies the rub of being able to let go. So I think one of the biggest epiphanies that I had, we're in the service industry. We're selling high-tech staffing, B2B. And we were normally selling the largest accounts in the enterprise. Your name was on the door. But what I learned was I had a shift from being the brand salesperson to being the developer of talent. And once I gave myself permission to become the best developer of talent, versus ego on bringing in the biggest accounts for the company, I was able to make that shift and spend my time in a different and productive way. And if you're going to scale your company to tens of millions of dollars, at some point, you're going to have to address that.
I love that. Seeing yourself redefining your role, right? I love that word,
Yeah.
developer of talent. That's really it's not your time to shine, right? You're the developer of talent that allows others to shine, and embracing that becomes really important with that. And I'm curious, when you see people bring in leadership, where do you see things go wrong with leadership?
Number one, you're not hiring to your values and your purpose. So are you finding people that have the same values, they embody and they act and behave in a way similar to you? We have a lot of diversity in experience and expertise, but we have a lot of alignment around values and purpose. The second thing is not being clear on the mission in the job scorecard. You may call it a job description, but the job scorecard of what the mission for that person is. And I'll give you an example. You could have a VP of sales title, but you could have one person that was very good at launching a brand new territory from scratch. You can have another VP of sales that's very good at developing and growing a sales team from 10 to 20 people. And you can have another VP of sales who's very good at doing new product rollout and territory development. Not all of them will be successful in all three of those missions for the role. So get clear on the mission, not the title, and make sure you put the right person who also shares your values and purpose with it.
I love it. Now, I know one of the things that happens in a scaling organization is the mission changes, right? The mission of the role
Yes.
changes, right? Maybe what you did a year ago in that particular role, that person was amazing, but
Yeah.
they're not able to grow in the new need of the company. Like maybe they're not able to design new processes or go into new markets, like you said. And so that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that loyalty factor, right? They're like, I used to love this person, but now they frustrate me and they're holding me back, right? And one of the things that we see is, cash flow is limited, right? Sometimes you can't afford to keep both people on, right?
Sure.
And still make our profit first percentages. Tell me what happens then.
I think it goes back to my earlier comment about when the owner, CEO changes their focus to talent development, you see where that person needs to grow in order to grow in the same direction as the company. The biggest mistake we make is take the best salesperson or best accountant and make them the VP of sales or the CFO. Just because you like them and it's convenient, but it doesn't mean they're ready. So when you see that person who you promoted because it was convenient and not because they were ready, you have a problem, and they go from an A player sales rep to a C player sales manager. Well, imagine the mission is a new territory. You want to open a location in New England. You're in Houston, and I hire a person for that. But 3 years later, I need them to be North American based, not just a small region. How did I develop them to be ready for that next step? Or did I just say, you're internal, you're a nice person, and I'm going to give you a promotion? So you need to be in sync with their current and their future state to develop them to be ready. Now, I will tell you, some people will opt out. Some people would say, I love being the sales manager, but I do not want to be on a plane and travel across all 50 states. So no, I don't want that next step of the journey. And that's a good conversation to have too. And other people will not be willing to do the work to develop themselves in time to be ready. That's another form of opt out. and you have to be okay with that as well. You don't have to like it. You just have to understand it. So I think if to 10x your company, Suzanne, you've got to be willing to 10x your people. And that's ultimately what this all comes down to.
Right. And I love too, Herb, that you talked about it, that, sometimes people are going to opt out, whether they opt out by leaving, but more likely they're going to opt out by not changing is what I find.
Yes.
Not rising to the occasion. And as a leader, the reality is sometimes you'll have to make that hard decision to release them if there isn't a role that they can stay in and be an A player.
Yeah, true. If you think about it, a lot of companies that have plateaued, you may have a nice culture. People may have stayed with your company many years, but your company has not grown. And so those people are comfortable. They don't like a lot of change. And as the owner, you have to ask yourself, what is your vision for the next 5 to 10 years? And that if you want a vision of scaling up and change, not all of those same people may want to go along with you for that ride. And that's a tough period in transitioning to a scaling up firm. But what I also learned was A players want a bigger future, and you're either going to be able to give it to them or they're going to get it somewhere else.
Mm.
And so that kept me up at night, always worried about, it's fine if the company's good for Herb and Herb's lifestyle, but will it be good enough for all the A players in their family? And it always kept me wanting to grow in a productive, profitable way so that I could keep as many of those great people as I could.
I love it. Now, one of the things that you talked about and you kind of hinted on early on was changes in leadership. And I think that all of us at some point in a scaling company have run into that in the most inopportune times, especially in an area, I would say during the COVID years, even now, if you've got a high demand position, you've got a player, right? Recruiters are, and you're known for doing good work, right? Let's put it out there. You're known for doing good work. You are like sugar to the flies when it comes to recruiters. You know what I mean?
Sure.
They are calling your people because your competitors are going to recognize the name, right? And how do you deal with the fact that, you're always in competition to retain those strong leaders? What are some things you can do to protect that, to hedge
Yeah.
that risk? Sometimes you're going to lose that A player. Maybe there's ways of keeping them, but what are some things that we can do to keep our leadership that are A players intact?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, realizing that you have A players and that they are marketable always kept me humble. I think some people take for granted the A players on their team and don't recognize the value and the impact these people have. I always did. And I always felt like if your intention was to build the company of industry leaders and lead your industry, then you could only have A players doing that to be at that level of excellence. And those people would be very recruitable. Number two, your culture and the strength of your culture, your commitment to your values, the understanding of an energizing purpose. Our purpose was meaningful employment. We wanted to treat every person. A lot of staffing companies would tout that they had a database of 1 million resumes. And I used to always say, those resumes are people. What about the one resume? Do we know about Suzanne, what's going on in her career, what her ambition is for her family and her community, and how can we best position her to use those skills for the greatest benefit? We were very intentional about our purpose, and the people that worked on our team shared an equal intention towards that. So that cut down on A players being recruited away because we were clear and we were consistent in living and behaving to the values and purpose. Second part, which is equally important, if you are a talent development CEO and you believe in helping people get to where they want to be in their career, I guarantee you they appreciate that and will help you get your company to where it needs to be. And I think those two things, culture and development and commitment to helping those people hit their goals, is why they stayed so long and helped us hit ours.
I love it. I love it. Now, the other barrier you talked about was processes, right? And complications with systems and things like that. Let's talk about what you normally see in a scaling business where they're not really getting efficient.
Yeah. So I see it in two areas. Number one is the kind of technical part. We grew up with a whole bunch of different, we have a separate finance system, we have a separate operations system, a separate sales CRM. None of them are integrated. None of them talk to each other. A lot of duplication, very inefficient. That's kind of number one structurally. The other one is the org chart of decision-making and accountability. Rockefeller habit number 9, do all employees know whether or not they had a good day or good week? You wouldn't believe how many companies I go to in the beginning, and the rank and file has no clue what their KPIs are for success on any given day or week in their role. So we need to help them get clear. What is success in your role? Think of the reason why a owner would fund a position in the company. Those positions are valuable, and they're one of the biggest investments in a company besides property and equipment. It's labor. Well, there has to be a good intention around making that investment decision. And yet, does the employee actually know, and are they aligned to it? Most are not. So I think scalable infrastructure comes back to putting the right frameworks in place for minimizing and having integrated systems, and then putting the right org structure in place to help them be very independent, autonomous, and clear about what accountability success means. You do those two things, it turns out well.
I love it. I love it. I'm curious, Herb, is every employee able to function in an independent way, to be problem solvers? And I'm just curious what your opinion is on this. Or is it a hiring?
Let me ask you the question another way. Would you believe every A player would be able to?
I would hope every A player would be able to, or at least they're hopefully put in a place where they can, because some A players are, depending on the role, may not be an A player in that role, right?
I'm going to share a scary stat, but it's true. When we first began and I did the A player assessment, we did it in a small division. 38% were A players. Now, that division in 30 months went from 25 people to 150. But what would have happened to me if I scaled it to 150 people at a 38% A player rating? There would have been a lot of drama, a lot of turnover, and more headache. So what you need to do is get your A player situation figured out first, then scale. We were over 80% A players at that 30-month mark. My life was so wonderful because the drama went down dramatically. People were more happy. They were more productive. They felt like their work contributed. They were recognized. The alignment was very clear, but we didn't know that in the beginning. So that was the importance around execution, screening in the A player value, purpose alignment, and letting them understand how their work makes a difference and be accountable for getting it done.
I love it. So like really hiring all A players. Now, obviously with 38%, that's a pretty nice size A player list. I think normally they say maybe 10%, right, is A players. So that's pretty incredible what you have with 38%. Now, tell me about how did they do during like the COVID time where it was hard to recruit A players, where A players were constantly being poached. How did they do during those times?
What I find interesting is that A players seem to emerge more during a really tough period. Why? Because they normally don't quit. They normally are very persistent and they want control over their life. A players typically don't let circumstances control their life. Like they never play the victim. And there's people that do. So I found it actually became easier to identify them in your company because of their mental mindset in dealing with COVID. It wasn't easy. It was hard on many, many of us personally and professionally, but they made a difference and they were more open to coming to companies like ours because they knew that our values and our purpose aligned with that type of mindset.
I love
And
it.
that was really important. So I actually think it turned into a benefit, not a bigger problem.
I love it. So guys, focus on filling your A players, your positions with A players, because it's going to make scaling a whole lot easier as you go. Very good advice with that, Herb.
Thank you.
Very, very good. And I think the last barrier that we had was recognizing change. And I think a lot of people struggle with that in 2023, right?
Yeah,
Especially even on the marketing function, what worked a year ago didn't work, right? If you were counting on
sure.
algorithms and that type of thing. Um, let's talk about a good cadence to evaluate when change needs to happen and what that looks like.
So I think data is a very important tool for an owner and a leadership team. Trends. Are you looking at rolling 12-month statistics on the most important elements of your company? Whether it's new order activity, overall volume activity, gross margin activity, client retention activity. And as you plot that over a rolling 12-month period, what trends are you starting to see? Because a lot of owners get surprised when a well-informed strategic owner doesn't get surprised, they get proactive. So having the right data to see shifts months in advance before they ever really wholly damage your company, and then being willing to get market facing and get on the phone, go out to dinner, meet with the clients and learn firsthand what's happening in the market. Talk to your employees who are on the front line, listen to them about what's happening in the market. These are things that are going to be invaluable to make sure you're managing your strategy correctly. During COVID, many people, Suzanne, had a pivot. Some companies literally dropped 80% revenue overnight. That's a dramatic pivot. And thank God that doesn't happen too often, but it can. So then what do? You have to be prepared to pivot, whether it's a product pivot, a sales channel pivot, a client type pivot, whether you go from serving enterprise to small, mid-market, you go from serving B2B to business to consumer, whether you have to have a change in your pricing strategy as a result of the pivot. There's a variety of different pivots that we consider with the ultimate goal of trying to keep our revenue and our margin going in the right direction. We use something called a SWOT tool, SWT. You may know it as SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We look at strengths, weaknesses, and trends. What is coming down the road? Think of AI. Think of the trend of what that will do to your company, good or bad. Think of inflation. Think of government regulation. These are all trends that could potentially harm or help. And it's your job at the top of your company to be reviewing them every quarter with your leadership team and then determining at some point what you'll do about it. And that was a great lesson I learned on my journey, that we had to pay attention to that.
I love it. I love it. So those reports, those KPIs, entrepreneurs out there, extremely important. And not just that, the rolling 12 months, like Herb said, and not just that, but that SWOT analysis, what's coming up, right? What's coming up, what changes are happening every quarter. Those need to be also evaluated. This has been such a really good conversation, Herb. Really great conversation. Lots of great tidbits and information that you provided us. One of the things that I think would, that we love to ask our guests is, as we wrap up, if you could leave our audience with any advice, it could be personal, it could be business, what would that advice be?
Two things. Number one, get a copy of Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. If you have not read that book, it's the best $20 investment you'll ever make. Suzanne, for you, also, knowing what Suzanne does, get a copy of Profit First, because that was an incredible book for me as well. But take a look at those readings. They're very impactful. And then I'll leave you with this. I believe that a business owner and their team should not have a company that runs them. I believe you all have the gift of having companies that you run, that give you joy, that give you success, and that give you meaning. And I believe with the scaling up frameworks, it allowed me to create my ideal version of a company with a group of like-minded, amazing people. And I think that's what this journey is about. So if you're feeling drama, overworked, under-rewarded, and bearing all the risk, there is hope, and you owe it to yourself to take a look at the methodology that's going to help you get there. I wish you all a great journey. For those of you that want to learn more, go to my website, aspiregrowthadvisors.com. If you want to get a free scaling up readiness, how is my business prepared to grow? Take advantage of it. And if you want to know your leadership score, what is your level of high impact leadership? We have an assessment to help you with that too. Otherwise, Suzanne, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Herb. And what we'll do is we'll put Herb's contact information in our show notes so that you guys who are driving right now will be able to, be safe. And when you pull over in a safe spot, you'll be able to download that and click on his links. Thank you, Herb, so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, and Happy New Year. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to talking again down the road.
Thank you.